I
Yeah.
want to talk about some immigration stuff. So can I ask you a very basic question as a non-foreign policy expert? And I was thinking of this during the
You
interminable
being the non-foreign policy expert, you
yeah,
mean?
yeah, you are the foreign policy expert.
Yes.
I am
Yes.
not,
Okay.
but I'm a concerned citizen. I was once accused, not accused, but I was preparing Senator Schumer when I worked for him for a Meet the Press appearance.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. This is some years ago, 16 years ago. And I was prepping him to talk about the Supreme Court confirmation process. And he had a foreign policy person on and others on to prep him on Iran. I don't know what was going on with Iran, but something happened with Iran. So I'm very talkative. We're talking about, I don't remember if it was the nomination of Sam Alito or John Roberts or someone else. Then we got to Iran. And then I shut up. And at some point, Senator Schumer says, Preet, you're very quiet. Do your concerns end at water's edge? And they don't, but I didn't feel like I could keep up with the other folks. So my question is this. The bombing and the attacks by
That was a
Israel.
long windup, by the way. That was
I
for a
know, I'm
small
sorry.
punchline. For a small
You know
punchline.
what? I got the to-do sheet. I got the how you do Substack.
Hmm?
And on the sheet it said tell more personal anecdotes.
Yeah.
So I put that in. So I threw that in. It's an
Oh,
extra.
okay.
It's an anecdote.
Okay.
It's an
See, I didn't
anecdote.
know. No one gave me that sheet, but as you know, I
Yeah.
don't know how to use Substack. That's part of the issue.
No, that's clearly true. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is a long wind up for maybe something that's very stupid.
What?
So the game is all about preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons, in part, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I keep thinking of that scene in The Godfather when Michael Corleone and Kay are talking about their children, and she says she wants a divorce, and she thinks she's taking the children. And I'm paraphrasing here because I didn't look it up. You can look up the exact words. And Michael says, Kay, don't you know that's an impossibility? Don't you know that I would do anything in my power to prevent that from happening, meaning her taking the kids?
Mhm.
Is not the same thing true of Iran getting nukes? And it seems that they have a lot of harm visited upon themselves. Lots of their leaders die from time to time. And isn't it the case, whether you're talking about Israel or the United States or sort of Western democracies generally, that their interesting push to get a nuclear weapon, don't they know that's an impossibility? Is that a dumb question?
I think they know that to a far greater degree today than they did
Well, today, I
Friday,
mean, okay,
right?
okay.
No, I mean
Shouldn't
seriously,
they have known
it's
that for no, in what? Let me ask you a different way. How much does everyone have to F up that Iran kind of quietly and secretly is able to game out the obtaining of a nuclear weapon?
no, I don't think it's that. Again, we let the North Koreans have nukes. We didn't stop them. That's a really bad thing. It's an incredibly dangerous thing. We let Pakistan have nukes.
Yeah,
A
but we're
very
not
un
letting, but we're not letting Iran have nukes, correct?
well, yes, but that's that doesn't mean that we doesn't mean that they weren't on that path. I mean, they were getting closer. They were within weeks of
Yeah,
weaponizing if they wanted to in an extremely hardened facility, 300 meters below solid rock that the Israelis cannot hit and the Americans can if we choose. Um, but that precipitates a pretty big war. And there's been a pretty good sense in previous years that doing that was incredibly dangerous because of all of this capacity that Iran and its proxies in the region have. Now, what we've learned in the last month is that Iran's ability to deter attacks, their ability to hit back, is radically diminished from what people had presumed.
yeah.
And that means that the ability of the Israelis or the United States to launch a major war against the Islamic Republic is suddenly something that is very thinkable with very little damage that they can do in return to us, short of, well, things we can talk about that would clearly be the end of their regime. So, they've all deterrence is gone. Iran has literally no deterrence left.
Okay.
And the question is whether they would be so desperate to do something or so badly coordinated to do something that's suicidal. That's what we're now looking at.
I want to know what that means, but in the interim,
Yeah.
the remaining living people who are responsible for the development of an operational nuclear weapon, when they had breakfast this morning, are they like, I guess we got to find a new gig? Or are they redoubling their effort? Or are they doing something in between and understand it's quixotic? Or are they just sort of insanely driven and have hope against hope that they can pursue that? Like, what's the strategy on the part of rational, if there are such people, rational thinking policymakers who want the bomb in Iran?
If you are involved in the nuclear program and decisions on it in Iran, you don't get to do a new gig, right?
I
There
guess
are not
I guess
alternate
that's right.
career paths from that, Preet.
Right. But are they
So,
lamenting their gig more than they did before? And do they realize their gig is futile or not?
the lamentations, I mean, you can lament, but I'm not sure that's changing.
But they're not giving up. Okay, but okay. I feel like you're fighting me here.
I'm not
You got
fighting
you,
you.
you
I'm just, I'm
but
trying to put you into a
but
slightly
they're
narrower
right. But
discussion.
I guess I'm trying to understand, is there
Yeah.
any level at which there is some human in Iran who understands or will understand and realize it's not going to happen?
The question is, um, are the Iranians prepared and capable of giving up on one of the core pillars of their legitimacy, which has been their nuclear program?
Yeah, no, correct.
And
That's the
and
question.
they would have to
And
give it
are
up.
they? Are
They
they?
would have to give it up. Now, I think that they are certainly willing to negotiate, sit back at the table, even though they've just gotten the crap kicked out of them and done virtually nothing in
Right.
response over the last several days to Israel, and nothing to the US, and nothing to the delivery and transit of oil and shipping in the Gulf. Nothing. They've had
Right.
no
Well,
impact, right?
can we pause on that for a moment? Because
Yeah.
as a layperson who's not expert, I tend to agree with you. But a lot has been made about the fact that Israel's Iron Dome is not perfect, and there have been Israeli casualties.
Yep.
Does that have any effect?
No.
What's the tolerance
It's a rounding
level
error
of the?
compared to what the Iranians are suffering and compared to what the Israeli government is prepared to accept to actually defang their most important enemy, their most and historically most powerful enemy. So, no, I mean, there have been a few
Okay,
dozen Israelis killed. That is not nothing. It's about
right.
10% of what the Iranians have lost. No Israeli leaders have been killed. No significant damage to Israeli military or nuclear infrastructure. I mean, it is all one way, my friend, all one
Okay.
way.
So then, do the
And the
Israelis
Iranians
wait?
know that.
Do the Israelis sort of wait for or hope for collapse, or do they take a kill shot and change the regime? What does Israel do going forward, and what does Iran do going forward?
Israel does not have the ability to change the regime by themselves. I saw that just in the last hour or so, Prime Minister Netanyahu was saying that basically the way you destroy the regime is to remove the supreme leader. I don't buy that. I think the supreme leader is extremely old. He's actually quite weak. And the military is actually in charge of calling the shots, policy and literally, in Iran. I think if you remove the supreme leader, you not only martyr him, and create a rally around the flag to a greater degree. But you also potentially, pave the way of a younger new supreme leader who would be much more capable and effective than Khamenei. So I think that's kind of a distraction and not the main issue. I think the main issue,
but just on that for one quick second, Ian,
yeah,
did the Israelis, you believe, decide rationally that that was a bad idea? Or I thought there were some reports suggesting they wanted
yeah,
to get rid of the supreme leader, and the Americans, i.e. Donald Trump, said no. Do
we
you
don't
have
know. We don't know. I mean,
you,
that's the
you talk
Israelis
to
deny.
people?
There are reports that are
Yeah,
denied by the Israelis and that the Americans have not commented on, and
yeah,
therefore we don't know. What we clearly know is that the Israelis pushed very hard and have been for months for this attack. That pushing reached a fever pitch when Bibi was about to lose his government, right? Because there was the two far right parties declared a vote of no confidence. And at that point, Trump, who had been getting increasingly irritated with the fact that he was not able, after 5 rounds of talks, to bring anything to fruition, and the Iranians were playing coy, and he's already frustrated on top of the Russia-Ukraine issue, gives the Israelis the green light, and that's clear. And he's providing all the intelligence, real-time intelligence. He's certainly providing an enormous amount of very critical military support. He's helping the Israelis defend themselves. The only thing he's not doing is getting involved directly in the war by striking Iran, and he's not providing the so-called mother of all bombs to
yeah.
the Israelis to allow them to take out this critical deep nuclear site under a mountain in Fordo.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
The
the U.S.
Moab,
is all in right now.
the Moab.
Yeah, the Moab.
Query how a nation has, because I don't know anything about weapons either. Um,
That's not my expertise, but okay.
how you have a nuke but you don't have the Moab?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I'm going to ask my analyst because I've not actually asked it before. So you think
You're a
that
psychoanalyst?
you think they'd have that capability? Well, you
What is your
start with the
shrink?
psychoanalyst.
What does your shrink have to do with any of this?
I don't even have one of those, but if I
I
had
don't
one,
know.
I would start there.
I will point out to the new Substack audience something that listeners of the podcast will know,
Yeah,
is that when you say BB's last name,
yeah.
it's
They
as
don't
if
like it.
you're sending a subliminal pejorative message about the prime minister, because you don't say Netanyahu, you say
I said Netanyahu.
Netanyahu,
I do Netanyahu. I don't know why.
as in who should be the prime minister of Israel?
Netanyahu.
Netanyahu,
Netanyahu.
not that guy.
That's funny.
Anyway,
That's pretty funny.
okay, so
Uh-oh. We
is
just
there anything
lost
that,
the person just on that. I saw we went from 896 to 895. We literally lost the person
yeah,
when you said that.
it's Netanyahu,
That was him. That was
that
Yahoo
guy.
that got out. Yeah. Okay.
Trying to think if there's another thing I can ask you about Israel and Iran, but I'm going to move on because we don't have a lot of time.
Okay. I mean, there is other stuff. Look, I think let me just say what I think the key
Yeah,
point is going forward, which is that it is. I think it is quite likely Trump would like to give peace talks one more chance. So I think it is reasonably likely at some point we get one more effort at negotiation, and at that point, the Iranians are going to have to give up on any uranium enrichment in their country and allow the inspectors in. Because if they don't, right, at that point, the Americans are joining the war. That is what I think is going to happen. And if you made me bet, and it's a close call, there's a lot of uncertainty. My bet would be we do get talks, but they don't come to fruition, and so we blow that up.
yeah,
And I don't think that leads to regime change, at least not in the near term. And so that's going to be an ongoing and significant problem that'll get the Americans involved in another war. But is it worse? It's a lot better than it could have been, at least in the near term, although not for the Iranian people, and who are kind of getting they suffer either way here unless they can remove the regime, which is a heavy lift. And the
Yeah.
one other thing I would say is we're in the fog of war right now. And I have for a long time assumed that the Iranian regime acts more or less rationally. In other words, they are focused on self-preservation. Now, and I've already mentioned that the Iranian military is in charge, but the Iranian military leadership has been destroyed over the last 3 days. So I don't know. I mean, if you had a cabinet meeting in Iran and they were all sitting together at a table figuring out the right thing to do, I think they would actually come to a deal because they have no choice. But given what exists right now, with a whole bunch of people that have just been installed in new positions and who know that they're fearing for their lives at literally every waking moment, um, the possibility that the decisions are less than rational, or that a smaller group of actors feeling like there should be a hardline response and they're not getting one, decide to take matters into their own hands. And that's how you get an effort to, shut down the Straits of Hormuz, and then we have oil prices over 100. Or that's how you end up with a radiological event in Isfahan, a city of over 1 million people with a big piece of the nuclear program, and people blame Israel for it, right? I mean, there are lots of things in the fog of war here that could go very badly. And I'm not saying that they're likely to go badly, but they are a hell of a lot more likely than they were a week ago. And that's why it is
For
really
Iran,
strongly
for Iran, you mean?
in the region. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a global recession if the Straits of Hormuz are shut down. I mean, right now the markets are assuming that Iran is going to act rationally, and therefore the war is basically over, and it's just a question of how much more Israel wants to cause damage. But there's nothing Iran can do. That assumes a level of rationality and ability to act rationally that that is not completely that you should not be completely confident in, given what has been and is about to happen to the Iranian leaders. So I'm just saying that we should really want this war to be over as quickly as possible, and not just because we're concerned about the civilians that are getting killed in Iran or in Israel, but much more broadly than that.
Yeah. Rationality. I'm gonna put some emphasis on that, and use that as a segue to bring our discussion back to before the water's edge, domestic politics,
Okay.
immigration, although it's related to foreign policy also.
Mhm.
Um, what do you make of the fact that Donald Trump says deportation, deportation, deportation? Everyone's got to go if you're not legal. But I've been thinking about it, and maybe if you work on a farm or you work in a restaurant or a hotel, it's really tough for you. And he uses the passive voice. Things are tough. Things have been, I forgot what the exact formulation is. Of course, the person who made it tough for those folks and caused those people not to want to come to work is Donald Trump. Um, and then secondly, I know you commented on this. There's an NBC article about the president of a meatpacking plant who said there's no playbook on how to move forward after 76
That
workers.
was NBC Latino, by the way.
Makes sense.
It was. That
Seems
was NBC
seems
Latino. I didn't even know that there was an NBC Latino until I saw that article, but now we know.
okay.
No, I
After
posted
76
it. That's
after
why I'm
76
saying it's
workers
interesting.
in
Yeah.
Omaha were arrested,
Yeah.
and you said pay American workers a fair wage. I have zero sympathy for this. Voters should be outraged. Can you explain the logic and rationality of the president, deciding, midway through his policy that yes, some industries should be exempted, and employers making the kinds of comments that this person has made? What's going on here?
We have a two-tier system, and Trump is a fantastic example of how we have a two-tier system. And if you are close to the president, if you pay for access to the president, you are going to have a very different type of access of law that does or doesn't apply to you than others. And I am utterly disgusted by the willingness to demonize the some of the hardest working people that you and I will ever encounter, um, and to coddle the people that are saying, "Oh, well, I mean, like if we can't keep employing these illegal immigrants, we're not going to have a business model." Screw those people. I mean, seriously, I am so disgusted by that. I remember I had Oren Cass on my show, who is a very capable economist, and he's considered like one of the wunderkinds for the Trump administration. And we talked a lot about immigration before the election, and he was saying, a lot of stuff about how we've got all these illegal immigrants in the United States, and how it's intolerable, and Biden refused to do anything about it. Da, da, da. And I said, I hear you. I said, but how come you're not saying anything about the
Yeah.
CEOs
Yeah.
that are attracting them to the US, that are paying them wages that Americans would not work for, and providing not enough benefits so Americans would not work for them? How about them? And he said, "Oh, we're going to do something about that. That's a focus. We talk about that all the time. That's the priority." And I said, "Okay, okay. If you mean that, if you follow through on that, I am down with this. I am not down in just repeatedly hitting the powerless in the face, right? I'm not down with that. And what Trump is showing us is that he wants to demonize the poorest, the underprivileged, right? He has no interest in those people. And he has a great deal of interest in his buddies at Mar-a-Lago that pay for access. And as
Yeah.
someone who grew up in the projects, I am more disgusted by that. That was raised by a mom by herself, that did everything for her kids and didn't trust anyone in government because she knew the way the system worked. And this is what she hated, and I can't stand it. I can't stand it. And
Yeah.
I want these people, that anyone out there that is knowingly hiring illegal immigrants at substandard wages, I don't want them to just pay fines. I want them to go to jail. And we have a president that's saying, well, you've been doing it for a couple decades. So, I mean, I guess you should really still do it. Fuck those people.
Why,
I mean,
why,
seriously.
why don't we have squadrons of people analyzing? Maybe we do analyzing. We're talking about CEOs and meatpacking plants and other people in hospitality. Are you certain that Trump's businesses aren't doing that
Of
in
course not.
Mar-a-Lago or at Bedminster at this moment? At this moment, and maybe I'm missing it. I'm not seeing any stories about the number of undocumented people or others who may have immigration problems. Whether every single Donald Trump institution, business, property is clean of those issues or not. Is that odd?
You know, I mean, I remember stories about, the large numbers of Romanians that were working at Mar-a-Lago. My assumption was that they actually did have appropriate visas. And the reason why the story was a big deal is because, as someone who supposedly cares so much about the American working class, why would he not be hiring Americans? And, same with so much of the MAGA merch that he sells isn't actually made in the United States. Why wouldn't he actually walk
Famously
the talk? And
exposed on
so,
David Letterman
but I don't,
years ago.
honestly, I don't care about that because it's small. I don't. My needle is
Well,
not
well, well,
turned to
well,
11
well,
on every issue.
I care about
I care much more about the big
the
problem. And the
the
big
depth.
problem is that we have these huge companies and huge industries that are not being forced to hire Americans at appropriate wages.
Yeah. So I care about if Donald Trump is doing that which he wants to prosecute and persecute other people for, then I care a lot. I care a lot. Last question,
Okay.
kind of tie in two
I
issues you
get you.
talked about.
And I do love that about you, Preet. I like the fact that even if it's small, as long as it's a matter of principle, that you are out there caring for that.
It's not small.
It's targeted.
Okay. I don't have time to debate
Yes,
you
you do.
further on
You
this.
have
I don't.
time.
I have a
What
thing
do
at
you,
4 o'clock. I got
what's
an
your
important.
thing?
can't tell you.
What
It's
can you
like
tell me?
it's secret stuff. It's secret
It's not
stuff.
secret. What is it? Is it highly paid lawyer stuff?
It's personal stuff. It's not personal. It's professional. It's professional, personal. It's
Oh,
Are you filibustering the last 6 minutes of
I
the
might
show?
be. It's possible.
But this is important. You talked
Okay.
about being you could not be more disgusted in what was discussed. Are you more disgusted by the military parade for Donald Trump's birthday,
Yeah.
or the troops on standby in LA?
Uh, I guess the troops on standby, but I'm not really disgusted by either of those, frankly. I'm
Okay,
much more disgusted by the immigration issue and the demonizing of hardworking poor people.
okay.
I
So
think that
on your disgust ranking,
yeah.
there clearly are higher things than the immigration issue, right? Or no?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
What's the highest thing on your disgust rating?
Um, I guess the highest thing is treating people like products. The highest thing is the fact that we have in the United States and globally um, a governance system that consistently doesn't care and doesn't treat as human um, such a large percentage of our fellow humans on this planet. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? I mean, what else is there other than that? It's, I grew up as a Catholic. I'm delighted that we've got Pope Leo wearing a White Sox cap. I mean, there's no better way to show that you stand for the downtrodden than wearing a White Sox cap, and I think that's great. But that's not our country anymore,
Yeah.
and it's certainly not our government. And it's not the way the world works. It's not China. It's not Russia. It's not the most powerful countries. And I think that's the biggest thing out there that really bothers me as a person.
Did you see, what's sort of fascinating if terrible things were not happening and people weren't uh, at risk of losing their jobs and livelihoods or dying, whether there's stupid policy with respect to vaccinations or the taking away of people's liberties, whether they're deportation or the violation of court orders or any one of a number of things. Um, it's shocking to me that you have this language that's being manufactured to try to philosophically or principally go at this idea that you're talking about. And the thing that I heard recently was somebody go on and on in a social media post sounding semi scholarly. I don't know if they coined the phrase or not, but toxic empathy, and how progressives have developed a theory that is not actually in the Bible, but divorced from the Bible, of toxic empathy to make real Christians feel bad about their beliefs and their policy preferences. Did you see that? Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I do
Well,
know that
don't bother. Don't bother.
I know that
You with your
I know that
toxic
when I
empathy.
see Christian highlighted in someone's bio, it is almost certain that within the first few posts, you will find something that makes it clear that that is purely performative, and that is a problem.
Final thing. Are you worried that political violence will spread in a serious way, uh, as we've seen it happen in Minnesota?
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't already. I'm
Yeah.
surprised there's been so little
So you think we're doing
political
pretty
violence.
well by
Yeah,
that analysis?
yeah. Well, I mean, of course, I mean, if Trump had been assassinated, I think we'd be in a very different place, in a far more dangerous place. And that was this close, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the guy's
Yeah.
shot in the head. I mean, so we sometimes we just don't pay attention to the things that so easily could have happened, and we just, well, that never could happen. It almost did, right? So I mean, clearly there's gonna be a lot of things like that going forward. I mean, Elon stepped down. That could have been another, sort of, we saw that the Teslas and so forth. I mean, that was already becoming a thing. I mean, you saw what happened in New Orleans over New Year's. I mean,
Yeah.
there's definitely more, but in the grand scheme of things, the level of guns and their and high caliber guns and their availability, the mental illness and the indifference in responding to it, the algorithmic radicalization that is being promoted as information when it is anything but, with hyper online people on a daily basis, creating these massive divides where the average American thinks that their enemies are their fellow Americans. I mean, of course, that's going to lead to a lot more political violence. And again, I think the real surprise is that it's been as limited as it has been so far this year.
I got to run. Ian, thanks for joining us. If a little late, we went long because you had a lot of
Preet,
good,
we
good
did.
stuff to say.
We went long,
We went long.
and they say that
And you're
about you and me,
and and you're
sometimes,
joining us from your lovely office, which I've had the honor and privilege to visit.
and drink in.
It's very no comment. It's very well appointed. We'll do this again.
I look forward to
Thanks
it.
everybody for joining
Great
us.
to see you,
Thank
my
you for all
friend.
the hearts.
Okay.
Ian loves the hearts.
I love Preet. Be good.
Bye. Oh no, you gotta hang up. I think
Oh,
this
then
is
you get that. Well, you didn't say you love me. I said I loved you.
I love you too,
There
Ian.
you go. Okay. Bye, buddy. See you.